You know, there's something fascinating about how the biggest rivalries in tech often start with the most unlikely partnerships. Think about it. Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg and the Winklevoss twins, and now we have one of the most intriguing corporate dramas of our time playing out in the world of artificial intelligence. Today, I want to tell you the story of two companies that are literally shaping the future of human-AI interaction, OpenAI and Anthropic. But here's the thing that makes this story so compelling. Anthropic was actually born from the belly of OpenAI itself. It's a tale of ideological differences, safety concerns, and what happens when brilliant minds disagree on something as fundamental as how to build the future. So grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let me take you back to where it all began. Picture this. It's December 2015. Barack Obama is still president. Taylor Swift just dropped 1989, and most people think artificial intelligence is still science fiction. In a conference room in San Francisco, a group of tech luminaries are having what might be the most consequential meeting of the 21st century. The room includes some names you definitely know. Elon Musk, Sam Altman, who was running Y Combinator at the time, Peter Thiel, and Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn. But there are also some brilliant researchers you might not have heard of, people like Ilya Sutskever, who had just made some groundbreaking discoveries at Google, and Greg Brockman, a former Stripe CTO who was barely 27 years old. What brought these people together was a shared fear. Not fear of AI itself, but fear of what might happen if AI development was controlled by just a few massive corporations. Google had just acquired DeepMind for over $500 million. Facebook was pouring billions into AI research. The concern was real. What if the most transformative technology in human history ended up being controlled by just 2 or 3 companies? So they made a decision that seemed almost naive in hindsight. They would create a non-profit organization dedicated to developing artificial general intelligence in a way that would benefit all of humanity. They called it OpenAI, and the open wasn't just in the name. It was supposed to be open source, transparent, and democratically controlled. Elon Musk, true to form, made this bold promise: we'll give away our AI for free. The initial funding was substantial, over $1 billion committed from the founding members, with Musk personally pledging $100 million. The mission statement was beautifully idealistic: to advance digital intelligence in the way that is most likely to benefit humanity as a whole, unconstrained by a need to generate financial return. But here's where the story gets interesting, and where the seeds of future conflict were already being planted. For the first few years, OpenAI operated exactly as advertised. They published their research openly, shared their code, and made genuine attempts to democratize AI development. Some of their early projects were pretty fascinating. They had an AI that learned to play Dota 2 well enough to beat professional human players, and another that could write surprisingly coherent stories. But behind the scenes, something was becoming clear. Building truly advanced AI was going to be incredibly expensive. We're not talking millions, we're talking billions. The computing power required, the talent needed, the infrastructure costs. It was all adding up to numbers that made even these wealthy founders uncomfortable. By 2018, they were facing a harsh reality. The purely altruistic, nonprofit model wasn't sustainable for the kind of AI they wanted to build. Google and Facebook were spending multiple billions annually on AI research. Microsoft was making similar investments. How could a nonprofit compete with that? This is where Sam Altman made one of the most controversial decisions in tech history. In early 2019, OpenAI announced it was creating a capped profit subsidiary. Investors could now fund OpenAI and receive returns, but those returns were capped at 100 times their investment. It was a compromise between pure nonprofit idealism and the practical need for massive capital. Elon Musk was not happy. He had joined OpenAI specifically because it was supposed to be nonprofit and open source. He saw this pivot as a betrayal of the original mission. The tension came to a head, and by February 2018, Musk had already stepped down from OpenAI's board, citing conflicts with Tesla's AI development and what he later described as concerns about the organization's direction. But the most important person in this story was still at OpenAI, watching all of this unfold with growing unease. His name was Dario Amodei. Dario wasn't a household name like Elon Musk or Sam Altman, but in AI research circles, he was considered one of the most thoughtful voices in the field. He had joined OpenAI as vice president of research in 2016, and he brought with him both incredible technical expertise and a deep philosophical concern about AI safety. Amodei had spent years thinking about what researchers call AI alignment. Basically, how do you ensure that as AI systems become more powerful, they remain aligned with human values and don't cause unintended harm? This wasn't science fiction thinking. This was serious academic research into very real technical challenges. Under Amodei's research leadership, OpenAI achieved some remarkable breakthroughs. He was instrumental in developing GPT-2, which was so impressive at generating human-like text that OpenAI initially decided not to release it publicly, fearing it could be misused for generating fake news or spam. He also led the work on GPT-3, which would eventually become the foundation for ChatGPT. But as OpenAI grew and attracted more investment, particularly a $1 billion partnership with Microsoft announced in 2019, Amodei became increasingly concerned about what he saw as a shift in priorities. The organization was moving faster, taking bigger risks, and seemed more focused on building impressive products than on ensuring those products were safe and aligned with human values. The tension wasn't just philosophical, it was also personal. Sam Altman, who had become OpenAI's CEO, was a classic Silicon Valley entrepreneur. Move fast, break things, iterate quickly. Dario Amodei was more cautious, more methodical, more concerned with getting things right the first time, especially when it came to something as potentially powerful as artificial intelligence. By 2020, these tensions had reached a breaking point. OpenAI was working on what would become GPT-3, and the pressure to ship products and generate revenue was intensifying. Microsoft's billion-dollar investment came with expectations, and the company was moving toward what would eventually become ChatGPT. Dario Amodei wasn't alone in his concerns. His sister, Daniela Amodei, was also at OpenAI, working on safety and policy issues. So were several other top researchers who shared similar concerns about the pace and direction of AI development. The final straw came in early 2021. The specific details of what triggered the exodus aren't public, but multiple sources suggest it was related to disagreements over safety protocols, the speed of product development, and the increasing influence of commercial considerations on research priorities. In May 2021, Dario Amodei, Daniela Amodei, and 6 other key OpenAI researchers made a decision that would reshape the entire AI landscape. They left OpenAI to start their own company. The AI safety community called it the Exodus. In one fell swoop, OpenAI lost some of its most thoughtful and safety-focused researchers. But for Dario Amodei, this wasn't about corporate politics or personal ambition. This was about building AI the right way, with safety and alignment as primary concerns from day one. When Dario announced Anthropic in May 2021, the company's mission statement read like a direct response to OpenAI's evolution: AI safety via AI research. No mention of products, no talk of disrupting industries, just a clear focus on building AI systems that are safe, beneficial, and aligned with human values. The name Anthropic itself is meaningful. It comes from the anthropic principle in cosmology, the idea that the universe's properties are compatible with human observation. In other words, they were signaling from the beginning that their AI would be built with humans at the center. But here's what made Anthropic different from other AI safety organizations. They weren't just talking about safety, they were building actual AI systems, but with safety built into the foundation rather than added as an afterthought. Their first major innovation was something called constitutional AI, a method for training AI systems using a set of principles or constitution that guides the AI's behavior. Instead of just training an AI to be helpful, they trained it to be helpful, harmless, and honest. Instead of just optimizing for performance, they optimized for alignment with human values. This wasn't just theoretical. By December 2021, they had already built and were testing Claude, their own large language model that was designed from the ground up with these safety principles in mind. Here's where the story gets really interesting from a business perspective. Anthropic might have been founded on idealistic principles, but they still needed massive amounts of capital to compete with OpenAI and the tech giants. In May 2022, Anthropic raised $580 million in a Series B round led by Spark Capital. But the real validation came in September 2022, when Google invested $300 million for a 10% stake in the company. This wasn't just money, this was Google, which had been somewhat left behind in the ChatGPT revolution, betting big on Anthropic as their potential answer to OpenAI. Then, in February 2023, Amazon made an even bigger bet, up to $4 billion in Anthropic, making it one of the largest AI investments in history. This put Anthropic's valuation at over $15 billion, making it one of the fastest companies companies to reach such a valuation. But here's the fascinating part. While OpenAI was partnering with Microsoft to build consumer products like ChatGPT and Bing AI, Anthropic was taking a more deliberate approach. They were building relationships with enterprises, focusing on use cases where safety and reliability were paramount, things like healthcare, finance, and scientific research. By the end of 2022, the battle lines were clearly drawn. OpenAI, backed by Microsoft, was pursuing a strategy of rapid deployment and mass adoption. ChatGPT had become a cultural phenomenon, with over 100 million users within 2 months of launch. They were moving fast, iterating publicly, and letting millions of users essentially beta test their AI. Anthropic, backed by Google and Amazon, was taking a more measured approach. Claude was initially available only to limited audiences, and the company was spending considerable time on safety research and testing before broader deployment. This difference in approach reflected the fundamental philosophical split that had led to Anthropic's creation in the first place. OpenAI seemed to believe that the best way to ensure AI safety was to deploy systems widely and learn from real-world usage. Anthropic believed that safety should be built in from the beginning and that some risks were too great to learn about through public deployment. What makes this rivalry so compelling isn't just the business competition or the technical differences, it's the personal relationships and betrayals involved. Sam Altman and Dario Amodei had worked closely together for years. They had shared a vision of beneficial AI, but when push came to shove, they had fundamentally different ideas about how to achieve that vision. Today, as we watch OpenAI and Anthropic compete for talent, customers, and mindshare, we're really watching the playing out of that original philosophical disagreement. Is it better to move fast and risk making mistakes, or to move carefully and risk being too slow? Should AI development be driven by market forces and user feedback, or by careful research and safety considerations? And that brings us to where we are today. OpenAI has become the more famous brand, the one your parents have heard of, the one making headlines every week. But Anthropic has quietly built what many consider to be the most advanced AI safety research program in the world, and their latest models are winning head-to-head comparisons with OpenAI's offerings. The exodus that created Anthropic in 2021 has set up what might be the most important technological competition of our lifetime. It's not just about which company builds better AI, it's about which philosophy of AI development proves to be correct. As we'll explore in our next conversation, this philosophical difference has led to very different strategies, very different products, and very different views of what the future should look like. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the story is just getting started. The beautiful irony of this whole story is that both companies are ultimately trying to solve the same problem. How do we build AI that makes humanity better off? They just have very different ideas about how to get there. And in that difference lies one of the most fascinating business and technological stories of our time. If you enjoyed the content, please don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to keep up to date on content as we release them. You don't want to miss out.